Hey, shalom. Welcome back to our Listen and Learn with visual cues directed Hebrew immersion. Today we will be continuing our work through the book of 1 Kings, chapter 14. In this lesson I will deal with verse 18, and maybe more depending on time. Let's see how it goes. 1 Kings, chapter 14, verse 18. Kol kavod l'Adonai. All glory to Hashem. All right, let's read. I'll just scan it at first. Vayikberu oto. Vayisfedu lo. Kol Yisrael. Kidbar Adonai. Asher dibeir beyad avdo. Achiyahu. Hanavi. All right, so let's go through it. Maybe I'll read through one time normally as well, without the visual cues, just for those of you who like to have it like that. vayikberu oto, vayisfedu lo, kol Yisrael. kidbar Adonai, asher dibeir beyad avdo, Achiyahu, hanavi. All right, so vayikberu. So the verb here is kuf or kof, beit resh, if you're just listening. And what this means is to bury, B-U-R-Y, bury, bury. The initial yod, y, and the final u, the yod tells us it's third person masculine, and the u at the end tells us it's they, so it's plural, all right? So when you see the yod at the beginning, or you hear it in a shurik, the vav at the end, as affixes to the verbal root, well, to the verbal stem, this tells us it's an imperfect verb, so it's an incompleted action, and it's they. So yikberu means they are burying, or they will bury. I'm trying to force myself to say bury because I learned this as bury growing up in the South. So bury, I'm not even sure if bury is right, but anyway, yikberu. They are burying, or they will bury. The point is it's incomplete. It's an imperfect. But we have our vav conversive at the beginning, and this is going to change the aspect of yikberu to as if it said kaveru, right? As if it said they buried. So va yikberu, so they buried, or and they buried. And I do want to point out just for a moment that although we have a dagesh in the bait, you probably didn't know that if you're just listening. Oh, well, yeah, but because it's b instead of va, right? You could have heard that. It's not yikveru, it's yikberu. This is not a PL, P-I-E-L, binyan, verbal root. It's not. The dagesh is what we call a dagesh lene, a weak dagesh. And it's only there because of our begad kefat rule, or if you want to read it with English letters, begad kefat, which says that if you have a Hebrew letter in the alphabet, which is a beit, a gimel, a dalet, a kaf, a pei, or a tav, and it is not preceded by a vowel sound, in this case, silent schwa, right? When you have two schwas in a row, the first one's silent, the second one's vocal. Yik, it's quiet. Bet, ru. So when a begad kefat letter is preceded by a silent schwa, then we will get a weak dagesh, that dot inside the letter, which changes the pronunciation. Now, sure, when we read with kind of a pseudo-Israeli pronunciation, then the only letters which are affected are beit and kaf and pei, right? The b or a v, the k or a ch, and the p or a f. But in ancient times, the gimel, the dalet, and the tav, or if you do Ashkenazi pronunciation, the tav is still affected without the dagesh, right? So for Ashkenazim, with the dot, the tav is a T sound, and without it's an S sound. In the several ancient Hebrew pronunciations, without the dot, it generally was a TH sound, th. Okay, and the dalet without the dagesh was generally either a DH, like a d, like a soft d, like they have in Slavic languages, or depending on the region, right? Israel, Northern Kingdom, or Jehudite, it was a vocalized th, the. So whereas tav without a dot would be th, but the dalet without a dot could either be a y or a v, right? The gimel, similarly, without a dot would have been like a gh, g, although possibly some tribes might have pronounced it as a j. We see this happening in Arabic with the letter they have in Arabic. It can be a g or a j, depending on the speaker. Anyway, but the Masoretes still had these different pronunciations, so that's why that's there, in case you wondered. Now, you don't have to know all of this, right? If your goal is just reading biblical Hebrew and understanding, then we got you. That's fine. You don't need this. I like to pepper the lessons with additional information for those who want to know those things. But you don't have to know it. You can just read it, and you recognize that the weak dagesh, I'm not talking about the strong dagesh, the weak dagesh, does not change the meaning of the word, only the pronunciation. Every once in a while I get into it with someone on YouTube. I might start reading the comments. Some of it's interesting and some of it's just asinine, but every once in a while I get someone who, usually these are anti-Semites who have this particular opinion, coming from a certain way of thinking, but they think that modern Israel is Ashkenazi Jews, and Ashkenazim aren't real Jews, and really what counts as Hebrew today is really Yiddish. I know, for those of you who know anything about Yiddish, it's incredible to think this. It's totally different language from Hebrew, a totally different language family. So for anyone listening who's ever heard this nonsense before, Yiddish is Germanic. Yiddish is basically like a time machine into German language 1,000 years ago. I mean, it's like German from 1,000 years ago with some Hebrew influence, right? So there's some Hebrew vocabulary, and it's written with Hebrew letters. That part's true, right? Just how you write it doesn't have anything to do with the meaning. You can write it, a lot of American Jews today who like to, if they're texting Yiddish back and forth, they're not going to switch to a Hebrew keyboard. They'll write it with English letters, and it's got some Slavic influence too, right? Some Polish is in there and such. So that's that. It's Germanic. It's not Hebrew. And invariably, this person went on to argue with me that, he says, well, it's the Ashken. You should have said you're teaching the Ashkenazi dialect of Hebrew on this channel. First of all, there's no such thing as an Ashkenazi dialect of Hebrew. All right, so just if you've heard this, whoever's talking to you is either a fruitcake, like a crazy person, or they just don't know what they're talking about. All right, like if they really believe this, I tried explaining to this person, no, Sephardi Hebrew, Mizrahi Hebrew, Yemenite Hebrew, throughout the ages, Jews could send communications to one another throughout the world in Hebrew. It didn't matter if you're Ashkenaz or you're Sephardi or whatever. And the Hebrew is the same, right? The Hebrew is the same. It's just the way that people pronounce it was different from region to region. Just like you have even with English, right? Some regions, they don't pronounce the T's. Other regions, they have extra R's. Other regions, they don't. It's the same thing. We wouldn't say that, like, Bostonian English is a different dialect of English than the normal American English. No, it's just a pronunciation. Although, granted, you might have some extra slang or whatever in a certain region. But so anyway, so just to dispel that, no. And in point of fact, the pronunciation in Israeli Hebrew is primarily the result from Sephardic pronunciation, right? So anyway, all right. So most of what we do here is closer to Sephardic pronunciation, kind of being closer, not completely, but closer to Israeli pronunciation. And of course, some things I borrow a couple of things from Ashkenazi because I think it's better for the auditory learners, because our goal is to understand, right? We're not doing the ancient pronunciation almost at all, except with the ayin. I like to pronounce the ayin, not because I'm trying to be more authentic, to be more like ancient Hebrew, like classical Hebrew, but because I wish I had learned it that way. Because you have many words where one word that's spelled with an aleph sounds the same as another word spelled with an ayin. And if I only had learned to pronounce it those two different ways, there would never be any confusion, right? So, and I don't want that to happen to you guys, to have to go through that like I had to go through relearning and separating those out. Okay, so it's also to help the auditory learners to recognize vocabulary. All right, so anyway. Comments are welcome down below. Please feel free to leave comments if you weren't in the live chat with us when we did this. I will be happy to answer your questions. Just please understand that sometimes I'm a bit slower to respond to a response. So the first comment I will see, but then when I respond to you and you respond back, I don't get those notifications on YouTube for some reason. So it can go a few months and oh my gosh, I didn't answer the person's answer to my answer. All right, so let's go. Vayikberu, so they buried him. Vayisfedu. Same thing is happening with this word. The verb is safad. It's samech pei dalet. Safad, which is to mourn or to engage in mourning rites. In some contexts, it means to bewail someone, right? To bewail. All right. Again, the dagesh is there in the it's yisp do, not yisfedu. It's a p sound from the pay, not because this is a pl, but because it's preceded by a non-vowel sound, the silent schwa. So if you're watching my notes, I have the same begad kifat note for both of these words. Okay, yispedu, they are mourning or they will mourn. Va yispedu, and they mourned lo for him, meaning for the young prince who had died. All right. Who mourned? What's the subject of? Actually, it's a double subject. It's the subject of vayikberu, they buried, and vayisfedu, they mourned. Lo, for him, kol Yisrael, all of Israel. Sorry if there's any background noise making it through. I told everybody I'm recording upstairs today because I'm not feeling well. I didn't want to go down into the studio to do it. Kidbar Adonai. We have a construct chain. The last word is definite, so the whole chain is definite. So ki, we would expect kaf with a schwa, but you can't start a word with two schwas in a row, so it's lengthened to a chirik. Okay? Ki, as or like, devar Adonai. Instead of davar, it became devar. That's the construct state of the word. So davar means word, and devar is word of. Right? Okay? Devar Adonai, according to the word of Adonai, of Hashem, or more commonly, the word of the Lord, right? Asher, Aleph Shin Resh, which dibeir, he spoke, beyad avdo. So we have another construct chain here. Yad of the avid of I should have colorized that bait as orange. Sorry about that. I'm not going to correct it right now. Okay, hope you don't mind. So by, and because the last word is it's his, that makes it definite. So the yad, the hand of the avid, the servant of him. So by the hand of his servant, the yad, the avdo. Who's that servant? Achiyahu, hanavi, the prophet. Achiyahu hanavi. So if you're just listening, there's a dagesh, a strong dagesh in the noon, which means there are two noons there. Hal became han, the navi. Noon, beit, yod, aleph. A navi is, of course, a prophet. And I would like to share with you the excellent understanding of this word by my Ugaritic teacher, Dr. Michael Heiser. May he rest in peace. He had wonderful insights, and he points out that a navi is not all about the prophesying. Right? We oftentimes think navi, it's somebody who prophesies, right? But rather, a navi, his primary function was a law enforcer, a Torah enforcer. So the prophets, as much as we love them, and we are grateful that Hashem has sent them, it should be understood that their primary objective was always to keep the Bnei Yisrael on the right track, to live by the divine law which was invented by God. Right? Shout out to Zaken Tony, brother Tony, elder Tony from our Kahal, for pointing out one time it's best to think of this not as the law of Moses, which although it's referred to this way even in scripture, that's okay, but as the law of God, because this reminds us that it's not like some evil thing, oh, we were in bondage under the law of Moses, because God is the one who thought it up. He's the one who invented it, and he does not invent anything that is bad or evil. All right, let's read through again. This time you try to translate before I do. Vayikberu avdo, vayisfedu lo. Sorry, that was kind of fast. Vayikberu, so they kavard. And if you just remember that a kever is a grave, then you can remember the verb quite easily. Well, to grave somebody, what does it mean? To bury. Okay, so then they buried him. Vayisfedu, and they mourned, they sepharded, lo, for him. Now, where's our subject? Kol Yisrael, all of Israel. Kidbar Adonai, as Devar Adonai, the Devar, the word of Adonai. Asher, which dibeir, this is a PL here, excuse me, which he spoke. Beyad avdo, bait should have been orange. By the by the hand of avdo, his servant. Achiyahu, hanavi. Achiyahu, the Navi, the prophet. One more time, regular reading, no tones or anything. Vayikberu oto, vayisfedu lo, kol Yisrael. Kidbar Adonai, asher dibeir biyad avdo, Achiyahu, hanavi. Okay, great. Thanks for the lesson. Thanks for being here. Or if you watched it later, please give me a note. Let me know what you thought. If you had any questions, I apologize for my voice. I thought about canceling class, but I decided, let's go ahead and have it. Better to have it with a scratchy voice for you guys than to not have it at all. Shalom, shalom.